place people call home. But is Austin facing a crisis when it comes to affordable housing for all? That's our topic today on Austin Faith Dialogue. Austin Faith Dialogue, a public affairs series at the crossroads of religion and life. Austin Faith Dialogue highlights the interaction of the religious community with the social and cultural issues in the area in and around the capital city. Austin Faith Dialogue is brought to you by Austin Metropolitan Ministries in cooperation with KTBC TV. Join us now for this week's edition of Austin Faith Dialogue. Hello, I'm Richard Thompson, pastor of Central Presbyterian Church, and your host for today's edition of Austin Faith Dialogue. Even through the rough economic times of the mid-'80s, Austin, Texas' capital city, was always considered a very livable community, just as it is today. But as we all make our way through the '90s, has Austin outpriced itself when it comes to affordable housing? That's the question we hope to answer, but first, let's take a look at some interesting information about the current housing situation all Austin residents face. The 1990 census reports that the median monthly rent for an apartment in Austin at that time was listed at $346. The median value of a house occupied in that time census in 1990 was over $76,000. And as any local real estate expert will tell you, those figures have gone up since then considerably. And why not? Seems to be a seller's market. Just look at the current occupancy rates for apartments in Austin. Apartments stand at 95% occupancy. Now, joining us to discuss this important issue of housing in Austin are two people who are making a daily impact on the availability of housing in our city. Our first guest is Frances Ferguson. She's Executive Director of the Central Texas Mutual Housing Authority. Our second guest is Sandy Wilder, Director of Marketing and Promotions for Houston Tillotson College. In April of 1992, the president of the school entered into a partnership with the city of Austin to help develop affordable and desirable low-income housing in Austin's east side. We hope to find out more about this program today, and we welcome you both to our program.
Thank you.
And Frances, I would like to welcome you back since you were with us just over 3 years ago, and get a bit of an update on what the housing situation here is in the city, the needs in terms of affordable, moderate, and low-income housing. And I might just recall the fact that at that time, you were responding to that through your Mutual Housing Authority, or give me your name.
The Central Texas Mutual Housing Association.
Association, okay. And at that time, you had how many units that you were making available to folks?
I think probably about 200. And now we're at just shy of 500 units.
Okay. And so you're moving in the direction of eventually hoping to have how many available?
I'd like to see us grow over the next, say, 10 years to about 5,000 units.
Okay. You're ambitious.
Well, the need is big.
Yeah. Because the last time we talked, I recall that we had some folks here from the Public Housing Authority, county, city. They said there were like 3,500 public units in addition to what's going on in the private sector, but that there were like 75,000 families suffering from either poor housing, and in some cases, the 1,300 folks that are on the street, no housing at all.
Right. The last several years have, since what those of, I don't know whether everybody else calls it the crash, but those of us in real estate call it the crash, wound up producing sort of an interesting effect on housing, which is obviously that things had gotten so overbuilt that housing prices dropped. Everybody who owns homes know that they lost considerable value in their homes.
Right.
And people who rent know that rents dropped considerably, literally a couple $100. Which means that over the last several years we've gone through, from about 87 till about through 91, rents hit the lowest point in 87. and rents were actually at a level that was under what it costs to operate a piece of property. So we've enjoyed a period of affordability as a result of fundamental supply and demand economics.
It was good news for people
Who
that
rented.
were out of the market before, but
That's right.
they could get places to rent.
That's right.
And I guess with the RTC taking over so many defaulted homes, there were some folks that could get into the market at that time that way.
Right. And many of the RTC properties have now been sold. We're down to sort of the final rounds. Many of the HUD homes have now been sold, and we're down to final rounds. HUD is no longer, I believe, offering its $100 down payment program that people may have heard about. So much of the federally held supply, which resulted from the overbuilding, has now been sold off. We were fortunate to be able to take advantage of that. We purchased all 500 units during those down years from '89 to '91.
Oh, I see.
And were able to purchase properties at well under their economic value. And so as
So you took advantage of that.
That's right, and that's what we hope to do. Now that prices are going back up, it will be harder for us to purchase, but we expect to continue to purchase property. And as a result of purchasing low, some of our properties, fairly nice duplex communities in South Central and Southwestern Austin, rent for as much as $100 under what they would be marketed by a for-profit operator.
I see. I think we want to go further into your particular program because it's one of the, if not the leading one, certainly out front in terms of the number of units that you make available to people through private means, nonprofit means. But the one very particular illustration of that we have at Huston-Tillotson. And Sandy, we welcome you in behalf of the college, and tell us a little bit about what that, I understand, is called SCIP. What does that stand for?
It's SCIP, Scattered Cooperative Infill Project, because the houses that are being built are scattered in different neighborhoods. It's a cooperative project between area residents, area organizations, the city, state, and even federal funding sources. And it's an infill project designed to put houses in and around houses that already exist in East Austin neighborhoods. The particular partnership that Huston-Tillotson is involved in involves a piece of property, a huge rectangular area just to the west of campus.
Okay, now we have a graphic on that. Maybe while you're talking about that, let's take a look at what may be available to us in terms of the location. It's east of I-35, and
that's right. It's east of I-35 and west of the campus proper. The whole area under consideration goes from 11th Street to the north to 7th to the south, and then from Chalmers to Comal, from east to west.
it's kind of an L shape, isn't it?
It's kind of an L shape. And the part that you see at the top and then to the left with the little cul-de-sacs, those are the areas where the actual SCIP homes will be built. The area that isn't filled in on the map is the area that Huston-Tillotson will own and that it will use to expand its campus facility.
Okay. Now let's take a look at how this is situated in regard to the city as a whole. I think you have a graphic that shows the state capitol and
the other map here shows in the shaded area where the SCIP project is in relation to the whole city of Austin. It shows that SCIP is east of I-35 and south of 11th and covers a rather large area in East Austin.
Okay. Well, now this is just to, as we see here, east of I-35, Huston-Tillotson borders, the entry is on 7th Street, isn't it?
The entry can be on 7th, but primarily will be from 11th. The main entrance to this project, called Heritage Hills, will be off 11th Street.
Okay. Well, one of the things that is interesting and significant about this is that it's a cooperative effort between Huston-Tillotson, a private school, church-related institution, and the city of Austin. And the connection there, as you said, there was some trade-off in terms of some property.
It's been a long-term project. In the 1960s and 70s, when urban renewal was the means for renovating housing stock, a number of areas in East Austin were raised, some of them right around the Huston-Tillotson College campus. And at about that time, the college then obtained several parcels of land. with the understanding that the college would use those pieces of land to develop low-income housing, to encourage commercial development in the area, and also expand its own campus. The problem with that is that the pieces of land weren't contiguous. They weren't adjacent to each other, so it was difficult to develop any kind of comprehensive plan. The project moved in fits and starts for several years, finally collapsed entirely about in the mid-1980s with bank defaults when the whole project finally didn't work. When the current college president came in 1988, he got word that area residents were wanting the college to finally do something, or perhaps let the city have the areas back to begin to develop housing. He worked with the city then, in particular with a man in the planning office, to begin to move on the covenant that the college had had, the understanding, the agreement it had had for some 20 years already. And with negotiation with the college, the city, area residents, what has ended up happening is that Houston Tillotson for $1 and the city of Austin for $1 have exchanged their respective pieces of property, so that we now have, the college now has, a piece that is all together and can be used for expanding the campus, and Skip then has a piece that's all together, phase one of Skip.
Well, there's $1 that enters into it otherwise, I understand, that the people who would, you say there are going to be about 75 units eventually occupied by folks, and half will be in a rent-buy situation. After 15 years of rental, you told me before the show that they would be able to purchase for $1 what they've been paying
People
rent on.
who qualify for Section 8 housing. The whole idea of SKIP is to provide newly constructed homes for ownership rather than rental. So some of the SKIP houses are available for outright purchase, and then some will be made available for people who qualify under Section 8. The idea being that they will pay rent for 15 years, but then at the end of that time, for a payment of $1, they will own their homes.
Well, that's quite a saga in terms of how this came about and how it's taken a while to finally put it together, but it couldn't come at a more opportune time, it seems to me, in terms of the critical need for housing for people who are in the working poor so often. It's not just folks that are on the street without any income at all.
I think what people can expect to see in the coming 3 to 4 years, and certainly in this year, people are projecting that rents will increase now that the market has filled in the 5 to 7% per quarter, which means that you might see rents going up over the next year as much as 20%, maybe even 25%.
Wow.
And so a project such as ours, which preserves affordability, or a project such as SKIP, which puts new units online, fundamentally the way to keep rents down is to now start producing units so that your demand and supply stay matched. And one of the things that's exciting about SKIP is that it creates new investment in an area of town that hasn't seen a lot of new investment, and it creates it in the area of housing, in an area of town that desperately needs high-quality, affordable housing.
Right. The construction, the jobs that it creates, it's all part of the stimulus.
That's right.
Can you give us a picture of other private, non-profit sort of efforts that are going on in town?
Yeah, there are several that have really taken advantage of the affordable housing that was available as a result of the crash. One group, Austin Habitat for Humanity, I'm not intimately familiar with their program, but from being involved in a general way, I'm aware that they've gone from producing a unit or 2 a year and now are up to producing say 12 this year, and it's my understanding that they're working on a general plan of producing as many as 75 in a particular area of town. Another group, Helping Our Brothers Out, commonly known Hobo, has also done a very good job of taking advantage of some of the HUD homes that were available for $1 a year leases, and has developed a successful transitional program that works with the homeless to reestablish their ability to get jobs and then to afford housing.
How many units are they working with?
They're operating, I believe, in the 50 to 60 unit range.
Okay.
But one of the things that's very important about their program is some of the units that they've been leasing, they need to buy.
Okay. We're going to come back to that in terms of some of the other opportunities that are now available. But at this point, we're going to take a short break, and we'll be back with more of Austin Faith Dialogue right after this.
Serving Austin means serving you. Each day, Austin Metropolitan Ministries is religion in action, providing affordable housing, caring for the elderly, marching against hunger, and much more. AMM promotes understanding, cooperation, and social involvement. So when we ask for your help, we're really asking to help you, Austin. To find out how you can help Austin Metropolitan Ministries help Austin through its member organizations, just call 472-7627.
We're back here on Austin Faith Dialogue, and before we continue our discussion on housing in Austin, we're starting today with what we hope will be a regular feature on this program, Call Dialogue. It will allow some of our seminary students who are studying at one of the local theological institutions to share with us some of their views in regard to a particular issue of the time. Today we have with us Brent Berry from Austin Presbyterian Theological Seminary, who offers us this perspective.
3 weeks ago, an old friend called. Ellen was outraged over a problem in her neighborhood. This problem did not involve a riot or gang war, but it is what you might call a turf war of a gentler nature. Ellen's neighborhood was in this turf war because a low-income housing project called Section 8 had been placed right next to the quiet little condominium where she lives. Now, my friend Ellen is not somebody that cares only about herself, but is the church-going type, who even tutors young kids in the inner cities. However, because of this low-income housing project, she is thinking of putting up steel bars in her windows and is concerned about where the neighborhood kids will play. Ellen bluntly said, "I feel for these people, but I get scared coming home at night, and I clutch my purse every time I see these people." You see, Ellen is caught in a quandary. She does feel for those in need of low-income housing, but her feeling is one of pity, not compassion. Ellen's quandary is one that I find myself in daily. Frankly, neither I, nor our government, nor many of our churches have ever shown much more than pity for those at the low end of the housing scale. Local minister and theologian Michael Jenkins said in a recent article, "We never had compassion. We have remained our own companions, not theirs. We came home to our companions and left the homeless to their own passion, their own suffering." So it is in the name of pity that our government cut the budget for low-income housing to 1/10 of what it was in 1980. The question still confronts all of us. Who will suffer with the poor? Who will have compassion for the poor? Jesus Christ gives the answer that doesn't seem realistic in this world, but nevertheless, it is the way to living out true compassion. Christ said, "Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." Jesus didn't say, "Hang in there, I'll be back next week." He was talking about accepting the poor and downtrodden into his day-to-day life as they are. He was talking about suffering with them, even in the same neighborhood. Kierkegaard spoke of Jesus' words as the grace of Christ, who refuses to be historical, but instead insists on being our contemporary. The scandal is, instead of sending tokens of pity, he invites the burden to come to him. We have to realize that only with this kind of radical commitment will our country treat housing issues in a just way. A radical commitment that sees all of us not apart from each other, but a part of each other. So to my friend Ellen, keep doing your work in the inner cities. It's good work. And don't worry about the poor and rich kids playing together. Except for a few pimples here and there, they're all pretty much the same. Ellen, I do understand your fright. And frankly, I'm not satisfied with my own response. But we cannot continue to let race and class issues, disguised as steel bars and clutch purses, divide our country. For if we do, we will never, ever be able to live in the same neighborhood. And then who will have compassion for the poor?
Well, that note of compassion is one that's, I think, timely for us at this particular juncture in our life in Austin. And what's your response to what you just heard in terms of that perspective, Frances?
Well, one of the things that's very challenging about housing is that it is initially very, very capital intensive. We're talking about millions and millions of dollars to produce the thousands of units that are needed in Austin. But I think what individuals and what churches can do in terms of looking at this, one would be, just thinking of Ellen there, would be that the homeowners association in her condominium might approach the management of that apartment property and actually look at whether they have a residents association and look at becoming neighbors. We, the homeowners association, you, the residents association. Why I think of that is because in our properties we're now beginning the process of developing our residents into a residents association who will think and act much as a homeowners association, even though they technically rent.
They have more of a sense of neighborhood and
That's right.
sharing responsibility with each other.
And once people knew each other, opportunities might go from there. First of all, you'd feel like you were neighbors. Second of all, the fear would go down because you knew each other. Third of all, it might turn into jobs for the kids. It might turn into... So the human dynamic can begin to interact once you now have people all together.
Now, is this where the church can enter into it more directly?
Right. In our program, the church has been supportive. The Lutheran Church, through its Missouri Synod, has donated some funds to support our resident organizing effort. Keith Lumens at the district office was very instrumental in that. And so what we anticipate in the coming years, while we couldn't turn to the church very much when it was millions of dollars that were needed to purchase property, we expect perhaps to be turning to the church when it's volunteers, partners for tutoring, partners in perhaps raising small funds for a scholarship fund. We'd very much like to see our properties have scholarship funds so that children growing up can look forward to an education and assume that an education is available to them.
It's not helping people pay the rent per se, but to make connections with each other.
In our program. I think there are other programs where helping people pay their rent. There are many people who fundamentally cannot afford rent, who cannot afford the $300 or $400 or even $500 that it absolutely costs to operate housing, which is where Section 8 comes in, but there's not enough Section 8. Section 8 is basically where the government helps somebody pay their rent.
You know, I was struck by the fact that Brent in his commentary pointed out that during the 1980s, by the end of that decade, only 1/10 was being spent on public housing as compared to the beginning. And I know in 1989 at the LBJ school, they had the National Conference of Governors had a meeting here, and they were asking for, you know, input by such persons as James Rouse, and nationally known for his helping develop affordable housing. And he pointed out, I think in 1980, 475,000 units were being provided through federal auspices. And by 1989, it was down to like 47,000. So I think that's where the 1 in 10 ratio comes in. So that's what we might call macro
Right.
ethics. But getting down to where the local grassroots, you've got a place like Houston-Tillotson, who's hoping to help provide 75 units. It's just a drop in the bucket, but I suspect from the faith standpoint, that institution, that makes a difference.
It does, because Houston-Tillotson very much sees itself as a part of the neighborhood and concerned about what happens in that area of Austin. The school, from its United Church of Christ and United Methodist roots, is also concerned about housing. It's a natural outgrowth of the faith background of the school. And Houston-Tillotson is looking at ways that it might continue to be in partnership with the SKIP project, say providing daycare for area residents once they move in, or assisting people with financial planning, or helping even with gardening. Any of the many kinds of skills that faculty and staff at an institution like a college have that could be useful to area residents.
Okay, so that's the same kind of thing that you're talking about in terms of churches in other neighborhoods. The college in that neighborhood could be in a human relationship with these folks.
And of course, there's other relationships. You know, Habitat actually uses people's hands to help build their homes. And any number of programs, especially transitional type programs, need donations of anything from one carpet to one stove, and whether that would be through Hobo or through Creative Rapid Learning Center, the various folks who work with single-family units around the city helping people transition out of homelessness need those kinds of donations. At the more macro level, at the level of major investment in housing, I think we would need to, the churches have at a national level been active through some of their national foundations and perhaps even through their pension funds. They can look at how to invest in housing through backing mortgages for multifamily development, or, you know, even making donations towards equity funds.
You know, if people wanted to get more information from you in terms of the kinds of things we talked about here today, I think it'd be appropriate for you to share a phone number that
Sure.
anyone could call.
We're here in Austin at What's our phone number? I forgot.
Well, you'll think about it and we'll come back to it. But I think that it's
447-2026.
There you go. You have to kind of program your subconscious sometimes to come up with the answer. And I think the fact is that this is amazing to me that you'd have private, you know, nonprofit be able to come up with that many 500 homes and manage it.
That's right.
As well as develop these neighbor relationships. And I think it might be well to let the public know about Huston-Tillotson in case others in Austin didn't realize it has religious roots. Could you just give us a little perspective on that?
The school is a merger of two institutions that were founded in Austin back in the 1870s. One by Methodists and one by Congregationalists, a precursor of the United Church of Christ. The two schools were merged in 1952 now to form Huston-Tillotson College.
Mm-hmm. So it's Congregational and Methodist in its origins and still has some connections with those particular church bodies?
And holds very strongly to those church roots. It's very important for us still to be church-related with all that that implies for concern for our neighbors.
All right. Well, I guess it was UT students that started what you're currently involved with, but has since been transferred. Who provides your main basis
Well,
support
at this point,
on your board and so on?
Our board is pulled from the business community, people who have real estate and finance backgrounds, from the nonprofit community, people who have service backgrounds who are familiar with the needs of lower-income families, and the residents of our properties. We're still filling those seats.
I see.
And our operating funds, because we operate as many units as we do, come solely from our operations. So when we go into the community or to the larger national funding sources for funds, our funding requests are focused on producing more units.
What's your annual budget, just to give us some sense of?
Well, including the properties, it's a little over $2 million.
Okay, well that's, I would say that's what you might call the multiplying of the loaves, to take what
Right.
the total market is not that large, but making a significant difference. And I'd like to just, and before we conclude, reflect. I remember in 1989 we called this Home Sweet Affordable Home. And I think that that's one of the things that we can end on, with a sense of just, that's still our hope and our aspiration. And thank you for helping forward that today.
Thank you for having
Thank
us.
you.
Francis and Sandy. And we'd like to thank you folks for joining us and hope that you'll be with us again next week on our next edition of Austin Faith Dialogue. I'm Richard Thompson, and peace be with you.